It must be more inspiring to sit and turn our mind towards God, towards the Supreme Truth. So let us all meditate for a little while. To begin with, we sit straight and consciously we relax physically and mentally. Let there be no tension anywhere in the body. Loosen up and let there be no tension in the mind. Why worry about anything when we do not know really the way God works? Let's keep an open mind. The essence of meditation is alertness, so being free from mechanicalness, being free from the grip of the past and the future. Be here, be in the now. If by old habit the mind goes to the past or to the future, do not go with the mind, do not get carried away by such thoughts. On your part, stay aware of those thoughts. Breathe normally. With every out breath, say to yourself gently, Naham. Naham means I am not, I am not, I am not, which means I am not this little self projected by thought. Naham with every exhalation. Memories, thoughts, try to create a picture of who you are, as good or as bad, whatever. Say Naham and negate it. Naham. Naham. Negate your ego, negate your false I. Stay alert and persistently negate the false. In the negation of the false, the truth will shine forth. Naham. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. The main teaching of the Upanishads is self-knowledge. If anybody were to gain the self-knowledge, nothing else is required. One is in touch with the Purnam. One is at the source of all creation. One is watering the very base of the tree of life. The whole tree grows well, beautiful leaves and beautiful twigs, beautiful flowers and fruits will all come. If the central teaching of the Upanishads, suppose, is got in its pure form by anybody, then all the secondary teachings, as we have been now considering, are on one hand not necessary, And on the other, they will come before such a person automatically. One who is at the fountainhead of life will easily find numerous laws that govern life as and when one comes face to face with situations. Therefore, we have many saints and sages of exalted nature, of great spiritual accomplishment, and even today we find some sages like that running huge organizations. And think of it, these sages did not do an MBA from Symbiosis or Balaji or IIMs or ISB, Harvard or Kellogg or any other place, Satya Sai Baba or Mata Amritanandamayi, Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda, number of great saints run a huge empire. They have ashrams, schools, hospitals, varieties of programs. They have highly qualified people, even Nobel laureates, billionaires, politicians of tremendous power, and even some gundas and badmash log also among their devotees. Everybody comes and bows down, Swami, Guru, and so on. And they manage it all. It must be very complicated. You and I sometimes get tensed, very troubled by the complexities of one little department in some organization. We are just a departmental head. We get so frustrated. Here there is too much of indiscipline, my staff are not cooperating, finances are poor, and my own pay has not been raised enough. Some complaint we make and we think of resigning. I am resigning, I am quitting, I am going away. The grass on the other side of the river looks greener. That organization, this company, that institution is so good. And if we go there, our story repeats. There also we find things are difficult. Then we think ashrams are good. You go join ashrams. In fact, a top executive in Chennai who knows me says to me, Swamiji, through years of experience in running organizations, I have come upon a truth. I asked her, what is that truth? Only one particular kind of organizations can have real harmony and peace. I said, which kind of organization? She says, an organization with no people at all. Suppose an organization were to be without any people, then there will be a lot of peace. But is that possible? Ashrams or educational institutions, schools, hospitals, anywhere and everywhere you go, at home or abroad, there are difficulties. But the point I am making is, someone who has no ego, who is illumined in his heart or her heart, has no complexes, has an open mind, a learning mind, he or she is able to manage a lot of things. In contrast, the vast majority of us, the overwhelming majority of humanity, don't have that liberating wisdom. They have a little ego in them. You and I have some sense of doership, some sense of who we are, some sense of what our background is, what our position is, to whom we are senior, to whom we are junior, where we are better than somebody else, where somebody else is better than us. This is called taratamya. There is a Sanskrit word, taratamya. Taratama means high and low. Taratama, comparative and superlative degrees, a sense of hierarchy. Our thoughts keep us at a certain point where there are people above us, people below us in different respects. And to such people as we are, the same Upanishads give a secondary teaching. We saw one bunch of teachings yesterday. We are using two words, avidya and vidya, which meant karma and upasana, action and mental practices, for which liberal meanings, as we gave yesterday, were physical activity and mental activity. Physical growth and mental growth. The bunch of verses we saw yesterday said both these are important. One cannot develop oneself mentally neglecting one's physical side, nor can one do the mistake the other way, developing oneself physically and ignoring one's mental side. We dwelt on this yesterday. This evening we shall take a second set of 3 mantras where again a balancing act in a different setting is advised by this Ishavasya Upanishad. Please see the mantras beginning with 12. 12, 13 and 14 are a bunch of 3 mantras talking of the manifest and the unmanifest. Please repeat after me. 12. Andam tama pravishanti ye sambhuti mupasate tato bhuya ivate tamaha ya usambhutyam rataha अन्यदेवाहुः सम्भवात् अन्यदाहुरसम्भवात् इति शुश्रुमधीराणाम् येनस्तद्विचचक्षिरे सम्भूतिञ्च विनाशञ्च यस्तद्वेदो भयं सः विनाशेन मृत्युं तीर्त्वा सम्भूत्यामृतमश्नुते. Resembling to some extent the earlier bunch of 3 mantras, here the difference we find is, instead of the pair of words avidya and vidya, you have sambhuti and asambhuti. Not only sambhuti and asambhuti, a pair of synonyms, sambhava and asambhava. They are the same. Call it sambhuti or call it sambhava, that is one. Call it asambhuti or asambhava. From a grammatical perspective, sambhuti and sambhava are the same except in gender. Sambhuti is a feminine noun, strilinga pada. Sambhava is a masculine noun, pullinga pada. In the same way, asambhuti and asambhava. Okay, so the pair of words we have now are Sambhuti and Asambhuti. Going once more by Adi Shankaracharya's interpretation, Sambhuti is whatever has expressed, whatever has manifest. In contrast, Asambhuti is the unmanifest. Once you take this pair of translations and then dwell upon these two words a little more, two more significant interpretations become available. The manifest and the unmanifest also imply the effect and the cause respectively. You put a seed in the soil, the seed is beneath the soil, and your friends, visitors, those who are walking around there don't know. There is the unmanifest. The seed is unmanifest. After a while, the seed breaks open through the soil, a sprout arises, a sapling rises forth. After some more time, if there are good rains like we had now at last this afternoon, a plant grows, and then all your neighborhood, all your friends say, "Hey, you have such a plant in your house. How nice! It's beautiful, it's coming out with twigs, nice shoots and so on." The unmanifest was the cause. The manifest is the effect. And another set of interpretations also comes into picture, and that is the whole and the part. Whatever expresses typically is a part. And behind the part that has expressed and come before you, in a number of cases you will find the truth of this. What has come before you to see, this is it. There is behind it a great amount of unmanifest, the whole. Suppose a singer comes upon the stage and sings a song, and you appreciate, that is beautiful, this song is beautiful. Now she has sung one song. Would you say that that is the only song she knows? She knows hundreds of songs. A writer has published a few articles. Behind a few articles that the writer wrote, a few books that the writer published, he or she has a whole lot of knowledge. Therefore, we have with this pair of words, Sambhuti and Asambhuti, such significance as manifest, unmanifest, effect and cause, part which has expressed, and the whole which is behind, sending out one part at a time. In the light of these interpretations, what is the Upanishad advising us? Take a look now at the literal meaning. The 12th mantra, the first among the bunch of three, says, if people go only for Asambhuti, the unmanifest, they will go to blinding darkness. This blinding darkness is an idiomatic expression of condemnation. We don't have to take it literally as blinding darkness. It is a criticism. If you call somebody Ullu ke patte, it doesn't mean literally he is the little one of some owl from some jungle. But Ullu ke patte means it is a criticism, it is a bad word, it is, you are scolding him, right? So idioms are like that. They are not to be taken literally, you have to see the sense of it. Andham tamaha, before also we had, in third mantra it had come, here also it had come, in the 9, 10, 11. In the third mantra, Asurya namate loka andhena tamasavrataha. Certain realms enveloped in blinding darkness, and they are demonic realms, demonic lokas. Those who have no self-knowledge end up in demonic zones. There was that expression in the third mantra of this. Then the ninth mantra had this andam tamaha. Now again 12th mantra has. Now you must be fairly familiar with how rishis used to scold people. Rishis, maybe in the Gurukulas, this was their standard classical expression. Right? So why is such a criticism of upasana of the unmanifest? Upasana is also again in the sense of going for, adoring, holding high. Some of us hold the unmanifest high. We interpreted unmanifest means the cause. We are caught in causes. We neglect the effects. Another interpretation we gave, we are caught in the whole, we neglect the part. A saint, Swami Akhandanandji of Vrindavan, in his commentary on Ishavasya Upanishad, gives some examples. This can be then stretched, extended to a number of contexts. Let's see his example. He says, being attached to the whole, asambhuti, and neglecting the part could be something like, let us say, a leader of people whom a certain constituency elected. He became a member of parliament, he became a minister. Bahut acha, Delhi pahunch gaye. But suppose after reaching Delhi as an MP and as a minister, he gets all the time very busy with national projects and hardly does anything for his constituency. That would be a case of somebody attached to the whole, neglecting the part. In contrast, there could be another person, again elected by a certain constituency. He also went to Delhi. He also by some way became even a minister. But his nature is such, though he is a minister at the central cabinet, by his nature he is always busy in his own constituency, or at the most in his own state. He is elected by some small constituency in Andhra Pradesh, and whether he is in Delhi or in Hyderabad or anywhere else in the country or even abroad, he always thinks of the growth of Andhra, suppose. Then that would be the second line of this 12th mantra. Ye sambhutyam rataha. Sambhuti is the manifest, equivalent to the part, equivalent to the effect. So he is caught in the part and he neglects the whole. You can stretch this to a number of cases. Somebody is very attached to children, neglects the spouse. And somebody else is so much caring to spouse, wife towards husband or husband towards wife, and neglects the children. Children relatively are like effects. They are the effects. Mother and father can be called the causes. Cause is asambhuti, effect is sambhuti, sambhava, something expressed. In countless ways. In a company, you are the chief executive. You are headlong into production department and you totally ignore research and development. You totally ignore a few people in the company who are the brains behind the whole policy making and functioning of the company. You forget their contribution. You are very busy in the final product range, and one day products get outdated or some other competitors make the same products with a little change in a better way, and then you say, hi, by then all your R&D people have left you because you are neglecting them. All the good brains in the company got frustrated with you because you never paid attention to them. You are paying attention to the production people, sales people. That is like the manifest. That is like the expression. That is like the effect. The causes you have ignored. Everywhere you will find there are the subtle causes and the gross effects. And you cannot neglect the causes and get caught in the effects, nor can you neglect the effects and get caught in the causes. Even in spiritual centers it happens. Spiritual centers, have a prachar wing. Prachar means the spiritual organization has some teachings, bhakti or karma, yoga or jnana, all this. And there are some people who are good at doing prachar. They go around and awaken the masses, come on, and so on. Then there are some who are not good in speaking or singing or reaching out to masses, but who are solid in their knowledge. They themselves are good in sadhana. There is some tejas in them, there is tapas in them. They may not have gift of the gab. See, somebody like me gives a lecture. I have colleagues, other swamis, some of whom are not good at speaking. But my heart knows their sadhana is 10 times better than mine. It is said even during the time of Rabindranath Tagore, there was some other poet in Bengal whom Tagore used to highly respect and acknowledge on occasions the greatness of that other poet. But somehow that other poet did not have such merchandise, such material, such products that would appeal to one and all. Tagore's poems, Tagore's plays, Tagore's short stories were a hot favorite of everybody, translated in countless languages. It went up to the extent of winning a Nobel Prize finally. Gita Anjali won Nobel Prize, right? In all departments. So in ashrams also, those who do prachar and those who maintain the ashram and the teachings at the ashram, maybe training of the sadhus, many times are different. And suppose the management, the trustees or some kind of board, governing board of an ashram encourages only those who do prachar, who perhaps bring funds for the ashram, which are also needed, of course, who increase the membership. Suppose they give a lot of encouragement to them and ignore and neglect the tapasvis, maybe in some headquarters or some centers, then that ashram will not last long, because this outer show will not have much value really. It is the inner tapas, austerity. And equally wrong would be another approach where, let's say, board of trustees or whatever you call them, the top management goes headlong and encourages the austere people who are doing fasting, who are doing hours and hours of meditation, who may not be able to talk, who may not be able to communicate. They are not pracharaks. Suppose they are encouraged and pracharaks are neglected, their demands are not fulfilled. A pracharak goes to some corner of the country and says to headquarters, please send some books, some cassettes, some CDs. There are a lot of people interested here. And the management at the headquarters of even an ashram says, don't worry, do more japa. Take the name of the Lord, and you put the phone down. That pracharak will leave that organization, join another, or makes his own ashram. Many things happen. See, someone who is rooted in the highest wisdom will not be affected so easily. But you and me, when some things do not go well, we get agitated. We are talking of the second level management. In the second level management, source as well as destination, cause as well as effect, the whole as well as part, they all have to be equally carried. You have to do a balancing act. In every job you and I find, if we are coming across, and nobody can be totally impartial, all of us have limitations, but suppose any of us in any position comes across means sends a message or gives out an image of ourselves as partial. Think of Manmohan Singh, the Prime Minister. Suppose somehow there is feeling, an impression spreads that he is very much pro-educated people. He doesn't care for the poor masses. Gone. He will not last long. Equally dangerous will be the other way. If the word spreads that he cares a lot for always masses, 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 he doesn't recognize the importance of educated people, academicians, intellectuals, scientists, and economists, and so on, then also his position will become weak. In fact, in politics, sometimes these are the strategies they use. With my limited knowledge of politics, all the same, I would like to make a submission that I heard that sometime back in Andhra Pradesh, a political strategy was set in motion. They continuously labeled Chandrababu Naidu, who had brought out a lot of IT revolution, e-government. In Andhra, he had taken up, he had implemented electronic government. Every village would have a little computer and lot of data, statistics would be recorded. That is sent to the headquarters, and sitting in Hyderabad, he would know any village, what are the parameters there, what are the statistics there, how many women, how many men, how many children, whether electricity is there in every home, water, anything and everything, per capita income, what you call the statistical study, and it's both ways. It was good. On one hand, everybody praised him, but on the other, I have heard the opposition parties slowly started telling, see, he is only into computers and high stuff, high tech. He is not for the poor people. He never thinks about food for your belly, clothes for you. He says, take a computer. कंप्यूटर खा सकते हैं क्या आप कंप्यूटर पी सकते हैं क्या, उसको पहन सकते हैं क्या? Like that, I believe propaganda was made. These are the tools that politicians use. Maybe he also did some kind of propaganda against them. It is a tug of war, In political propaganda, in all that election campaign, people go to any extent to malign the image of the other. They are hungry and they are searching for any piece of scandalous information so that the other candidate could be dragged down. They will not hesitate to do anything. Now especially in leadership position, whether you are leader of a family or a leader of a huge organization with tens of thousands of members and whatnot, you need to have an image of impartiality. You care for the least workers, you also are aware of the needs of the brainy top executives or intellectuals and so on. So, Sambhuti and Asambhuti have this kind of dual significance. The 12th mantra warns us against being partial to one group and being against another group. The 13th mantra would, like it did before also, would say that Sambhuti and Asambhuti have distinct results. 13th mantra, Anyadevahu Sambhavat, Anyadahu Asambhavat. Now, Asambhava and Sambhava in no way mean here possible and impossible. You and I have heard Ramayana and Mahabharata. There every hero shouts, Bhrata Shri, ye asambhav hai. Mata Shri, ye asambhav. The word asambhav became very popular with these TV serials, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Sanskritized Sanskrit came up, Sanskritized Hindi came up, and the word asambhav and all the Shri. In so many homes, sisters started calling their brothers, Bhata Shri, what will you have for breakfast? And he would say to the sister, Swasa Shri, please come, join me over lunch. Mata Shri, Pita Shri, Guru Shri. This is Sanskritized Hindi. So there I remember, I watched some episodes only. I have not watched either Ramayana or Mahabharata fully. So, but here and there when I had watched, I found this use of the word asambhav quite a lot. Kumbhakarna or Indrajit or somebody says, when Ravan says, go and finish them. Yes. Asambhav, It is not possible for me if something is difficult. I am raising this because in this mantra, it is not in that sense of possible and impossible. Here once more, Sambhava, 12th mantra, means Sambhuti. Sambhava or Sambhuti both mean manifest or effect or part. Asambhava or Asambhuti means unmanifest, cause or the whole. Attention to the whole has its distinct result. If you are taking always great care of the R&D department, you are the CEO, of course your company will have wonderful results in that domain, but company as a whole will suffer. If you are paying lot of attention to production, marketing and sales and ignore the R&D and the brainy fellows in the company, it will have results. But a company as a whole suffers. Just like yesterday we said, if somebody is all the time attending to physical upkeep, never misses his yoga, never misses his workout, never misses his pranayama and food, very careful, diet, sleep, definitely it will have great results. However, if such a person neglects his mental growth, down the road he will not have or she will not have true fulfillment, sarthakata of life. To make your life a beautiful picture, a beautiful success, an all-round success, a harmonious success, you need to attend to both your physical and the mental aspect. This was yesterday's teaching. Here it is said, no denying, any attention paid, any hard work done in a certain domain has its results. But in the process you neglect the other domain, part you have taken care of, whole you neglected. Or whole you took care of, the politician worked for the country but neglected his own state. Next year they will throw chappals at him, not give votes. You sat at Delhi only and you never cared for the constituency which voted you to power, they will say. And the other politician who thinks only of the constituency will not be welcomed there in Delhi next time, even if he wins. Why should we make you a minister? You always stay stuck with your little constituency. So, either way you are in trouble. But why look at it as trouble? If you take the teachings of the Upanishads in a positive sense, learning from this message, you say, yes, I shall be careful, I shall look right as well as left. I shall look front as well as once in a while behind. One should have an overall picture. Anyadevahu sambhavat, anyadevahu asambhavat. In all humility, the Rishi says, iti shushruma. We have heard this from our previous teachers. Please don't take this as coming out from under my hat. Or in Sanskrit there is an expression, swakapola kalpita. Kapola means chin. Swakapola kalpita. If we were to ask the Rishi of Ishavasya Upanishad, whose name we do not know, for Ishavasya doesn't have at the beginning of it some kind of Guru's name and Shishya's name, and a particular Shishya named clearly asks something to the Guru. Somewhere else you find it. For example, in Chandogya Upanishad, the mention of the Guru Uddalaka is made, name is given. And the Shishya is named as Shwetaketu. And then the little story is in the beginning. Or in another place, Shaunaka is the student, Angirasa is the teacher. And in Kathopanishad, which is called a dialogue with death, the teacher is Lord Yama, death, Lord God of death. And the student is a young boy, Nachiketa, maybe just 12-year-old. He asks questions. But in Ishavasya Upanishad, who was the Rishi who gave out this wisdom? And who was the student who received it? We don't know. However, whoever is that Rishi, he is very humble. He says, this is not Swakapola Kalpita. This is not my fancy. I am not using all of you as guinea pigs with some new theory. This is what I have received from my teachers, Dhiranam, they were very wise and they told us this. He even uses the plural pronoun. He doesn't say, the great teachers told me and not anybody else. I was the recipient. There is no I. The word used is we. We have heard this way and we are transferring the same knowledge. In the third of this bunch, there is a little grammatical circus here. I am following Sri Shankara's commentary. It is printed Sambhutincha Vinashancha. Adi Shankara takes by right grammatical rules that the Sambhuti actually means Asambhuti. How can you do such a grammatical jugglery? You know, the earlier verse, that is 13, ends with Vichachakshire. Vichachakshire, and if it is followed by Asambhuti, A becomes silent. There is a rule. A word ending in A, suppose is followed by a word beginning with A, then A becomes silent. Some of you know. Then that A is shown as, in written form, a slant, a bending S. It's called Avagraha. So Adi Shankara, and I appreciate his logic, I'll explain to you, says in the 14th mantra, you have to take one A while explaining. While chanting, it's not necessary. While explaining. Asambhutim and Vinasham. The reason he gives is, Vinasha is yet another word standing for effect. You can take Vinasha Shabda as cause. See, you have this cause and effect, whole and part, unmanifest and manifest. Against this pair you have to now adjust the pair of words in 14, Sambhuti and Vinasha. He says the word Vinasha will go only with effect because it is effects which die quickly. Like I gave the example of the singer who came on the stage and sang song. That one song that she chose to sing is the effect. And that got over in 3 minutes, in 4 minutes. Effects come and go quickly. The cause, which is a vast store, that remains for longer time. So if the Upanishad has chosen to use the word Vinasha, Adi Shankaracharya says that fits well with the concept of effect, given the pair. Then comes the grammatical problem. But what would be Sambhuti? Sambhuti also is effect. No, take it as A, and grammar permits it. Anyway, keep aside this grammatical jugglery. This should be taken more in a Sanskrit class than in a class of spiritual wisdom. Shankaracharya takes Asambhuti, adding one A, as the whole, and Vinasha as the part, and the 14th mantra then gets interpreted this way. Whoever carries both whole and part, Ubhayam, the word Ubhayam is there, Saha, together. Whoever carries the whole as well as the part. The whole is Asambhuti, part is Vinasha in this third mantra. Whoever carries the cause as well as the effect together. Whoever carries the unmanifest as well as the manifest together. A certain poet talks about life itself being like a combination of the unmanifest and the manifest, giving the example of a tree. This poet says, our life is like a tree in which the old roots are below the earth, unseen, and the fresh leaves and flowers every day coming and after some days going away are visible. Our life is like that. And the poet beautifully says, age-old wisdom, findings of the old rishis, beautiful traditions, beautiful cultural norms, a whole lot that our ancestors had found are all like the roots of the tree of life. However smart you and I may be, if we simply say, I will not take anything my purvajas, ancestors had found out, If you say, I am going to reinvent the wheel, I am going to start everything afresh, then you are foolish. Ours, especially India, is a very old country. And you know, some of the sciences, apart from the spiritual science of Veda and Vedanta, even yoga, Ayurveda, number of art forms, number of music forms, number of dance forms. We really don't know when that Bharata Rishi wrote those sutras on Bharatanatyam, when Patanjali wrote sutras on yoga or on health, or he was expert in 3 areas, Ayurveda. Ayurveda is health only. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarottam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi, says a shloka. He was a master of yoga. He wrote a treatise on yoga. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras are most famous. And padena vacham, the second area was, he wrote a bhashyam on Panini's Sutras, that is grammar. Thirdly, he wrote some great work on Ayurveda also. So this Rishi Patanjali, who was in 3 fields, he was the Leonardo da Vinci of India. You know, Leonardo da Vinci, they say, was a scientist also, artist also. He was many things. So many things rolled into one, right? So Patanjali was one of we had many Da Vincis in our country. He was one of the Leonardo da Vincis. Grammar, Ayurveda and Yoga Shastra. But when did he write? Some people say 5,000 years ago. Some people say 2,322 years ago. Some of them give such precise numbers, you know. It was a Tuesday evening he started and he completed it on after. They give such dates. Some books are available. I always wonder how they find out. There are some calculations. You get books which say Mahabharata started on such and such day, and they even tell the time. When did the first conch, when was it blown, and all that, and when did it end? Anyway, without going for a digression, good old things. And the poet to whom I referred says, to disown and to dismiss our heritage is like cutting the roots of a tree, saying they are all old. हमें नया नया पेड़ चाहिए, उसमें कुछ भी पुराना न हो, ये जड़ हम काट देते हैं. अरे भाई, वो पेड़ मर जाएगा. And somebody else makes another mistake. I am very fond of our heritage. I am fond of anything old. I like grandparents more than my parents, and I like my siblings the least. There are some people who like old people. They'll give company to the old. We need such people too, who give company, who talk patiently to old people. So there are people who, suppose in different respects, they say, हमें old ही चाहिए और नया हम काट देंगे. Anything new, this new and all is immature. Anything new is, I don't trust it at all. They dismiss the Western influences totally. They want everybody to wear only dhoti and old dress. Everybody should speak Sanskrit, English bhul jao. It's a Western influence. Everybody should have long hair, men also, and start wearing kundala, karna kundala and so on. Maybe you see Ramayana and Mahabharata, how this Yudhishthira and all are wearing dress. All of us wear like that and move like that. Pants, especially jeans. Don't wear jeans. Suppose how foolish it is. You need to wear jeans when need be, at times, on occasions, and you need to, in your heart, appreciate the teachings of Patanjali or Ramanuja, Chanakya or Vallabhacharya, spiritual as well as other subjects. You need to have old roots as well as new leaves and flowers. Together a tree looks beautiful. You need old heritage as well as new discoveries. Blend them, carry them together. Don't be a fanatic in either field. All such significance comes here. Drawing once more from Swami Akhandanandaji, of Vrindavan, was a very great scholar and a great saint, a great Krishna Bhakta. His contribution in Hindi language to Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavat, Vedanta is simply immense. He passed away, I suppose, some 20 years ago. So, commenting on this 14th verse, he gives another very simple example. He says, there was an ashram and there was a Maharaj. Maharaj means a saint. Some places a cook also is called Maharaj. In this story it is a saint. So the saint was sitting, Babaji. अभी अभी सुबह का ध्यान जप वगैरह हो गया था, थोड़ा हल्का सा फलाहार, not like modern swamis who eat heavily. Real Babaji had taken halka sa upahar, falahar and was sitting. One Sethji comes to him in this little example. Sethji, a businessman, comes very eager to have darshan of Babaji, of this Maharaj. Enters the ashram, asks one of the shishyas, Maharaj हैं आज? Maharaj आज आश्रम में उपस्थित हैं? And the disciple says, visitor Shri, he is very much present. So he goes. I am stretching the example. It's as simple as the visitor, a Sethji, full of Shraddha and Vishwas, presents the Maharaj a guldasta. That's the word Maharaj Akhandanandji uses, a bouquet. He presents a bouquet. The saint takes the bouquet. Here is a bouquet. And there are some other devotees sitting around and says, how beautiful, very nice. Sugandh, बहुत अच्छा है. And he goes on looking at it and then puts it down, again lifts it and then says to disciples, बहुत अच्छा है. But doesn't even for a moment look at the Sethji. Sethji बैठे हैं उधर. Sethji ने दिया गुलदस्ता and Maharaj appreciated the guldasta, lifting it 7 times and saying to everybody, how beautiful, how nice. But doesn't look at the Sethji at all. Sethji comes this side and he is saying, this is so beautiful. Very humorous situation. Adha Ganta, Sethji tries to make the Sant look at him once, but no. Sethji returns very disappointed. Next day, Sethji has great regard for the ashram, for the Sant. Next day he again comes with one more wonderful guldasta and comes and gives it to the saint. Today, the second day, the saint behaves in a very different way. He takes this and puts it and looks at the Sethji. How are you? Kaise ho? Kya haal hai? Sethji is very pleased. मुझे देख रहे हैं आज, मुझसे बात कर रहे हैं, क्या बात है? But he put this guldasta on the side, no comment at all. Didn't even see it, didn't even smell it once. Very disappointed. Very disappointed was Sethji. Now, giving this simple example, Swami Akhandanandji narrates how a wonderful, proper, pleasing, appropriate behavior. That is exactly what is said here. Sethji is like asambhuti, the cause. What he brought is like sambhuti, the effect. The word used, Vedic grammar, Vedic language is sometimes a little involved. The word used is vinasha. Why such a terrible word, vinasha? Well, philosophically all effects are like that. They are easily destructible. In the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, with which many of you are familiar, towards the end Lord Krishna says, Dvavimau purushav loke ksharascha evacha. In this world, there are 2 principles. One is perishable, second is imperishable. Kshara and akshara. Dvavimau purushau loke ksharaschaksara evacha ksharas sarvani bhutani kutastokshara uchyate. He is talking of Vinasha and Asambhuti there. Kshara Purusha is Vinasha. Akshara Purusha. Purusha means a principle. Just like today physics would say the whole universe is made of two principles, matter and energy. Energy and matter. There are two principles. Once some philosophers attended a conference of physics. All discussion was about matter and energy. The philosophers could not understand much. They went into a separate room and started discussing in philosophical language. And they took the question, let us talk about our mind, because in philosophy we talk about mind and spirit and all that. And just because they had attended just now a physics conference and got confused, they took up the issue. Is mind matter or is mind energy? Let us take that question. After a while they could not arrive at any conclusion. So one of the philosophers said, if the mind is matter, never mind. If the mind is not matter, mind is energy, it doesn't matter. Is it matter or is it energy? If mind is matter, never mind. If mind is energy, it doesn't matter. They concluded and went ahead. Philosophers have very ingenious ways of going around any topic, That is why when a young man asked Socrates, should I marry? Socrates, without batting an eyelid, said, you should. The man did not expect such a quick answer. The young man said, sir, why did you say I should marry? Socrates said, yeah, you should marry. Why? Why do you say so, with such conviction? He said, you see, young man, if you marry, if your wife is good, you will be happy. If your wife is not good, you will be a philosopher like me. Which is also very nice. A philosopher can go around any topic, explaining it away in some way. But true philosophers do not explain away, but they find the true nature of things. Who am I? They will not stop till they are utterly clear of who they are. They don't explain away who I am. If you try to explain away, then you can finish the business very quickly. But that would only for, as in Viveka Chudamani, Adi Shankara uses an expression, if you just have a lot of scholarship and you explain away things, anybody asks any question, you give some answer and, send him away. Those people go, oh, yeah, I didn't understand, but yeah, I think that answer was impressive. You didn't really solve. Vivek Chudamani says, such scholarship which explains away things does not determine the true nature of things, is only for bhukti. That can give you a livelihood. Bhuktaye, natu muktaye. Just shastra jnana, just scholarship, just bamboozling it is called. Using some bombastic words and expressions and finally leaving the audience in a sense of awe, but they are not really free of their sorrow. That would only give to the speaker or the writer or whoever bhukti, not mukti. Liberation is different. So the word vinasha stands for that kshara purusha, asambhuti stands for the akshara purusha, and those of you who know the 15th chapter also know that in the very next verse, Sri Krishna says, other than kshara and akshara, there is a third one, that is uttama purusha. Therefore the whole 15th chapter is called Purushottama Yoga. Uttama purushastvanyaha paramatmetyudahritah yo lokatrayamavishya bibartyavyaya ishvaraha, he says, which goes very well with Ishavasya. What was touched upon in the first mantra or in the fourth and fifth, again in sixth and seventh, and in the eighth. Self-knowledge. That is the Uttama Purusha. Knowing which you are liberated. But one notch below, you are caught in duality. There is the part, there is the whole. There is the effect, there is the cause. There is the manifest, there is the unmanifest. There is the source, there is what has come out. There is the state, there is the country. There is the country, there is the world. There is my language, there is a national language. There is my profession, but the society has its own. Everywhere there are divisions. One notch below, the world is full of varieties. And nobody can run away from it except that person who has gone to the source. I remember one more very beautiful parable of Sri Ramakrishna, which is helpful in sadhana also, especially in bhakti sadhana. Sri Ramakrishna says, Bhagavan, that is God, is like a fisherman. He comes to the bank of a river. He has got a net in his hands. He enters the waters. He stands in water, the water is up to his maybe knee joint or even a little more. And then he throws the net. A lot of fish in the waters of the river get caught. But some very intelligent fish, you know what they do? They, as soon as they see some disturbance in the water, they realize the net has fallen. Ishvara has thrown the net of Maya. But those pious and wise fish, they immediately rush to the very feet of the fisherman. Where the fisherman is standing, they go and they are just around his feet. He looks at them and smiles. Because the net, its reach begins after some distance. Samjho 4-5 feet ke baad. Not where his feet are. A little distance and then next 20 feet. It's a huge net. And hundreds of fish are caught. But a handful of fish who go and take shelter by his feet, they are saved. He is looking at them. If he wants, he can catch them by hand maybe. But he smiles. Chalaki hai, rane do. So if you and I are devoted to God, then we don't have to worry about the net of Maya. In the earlier bunch of 3 verses, we had talked about what were the words used? Vidya and Avidya. Now the words are Asambhuti and Sambhuti. All these are aspects of the net of Maya. If any one of us has, in the language of Bhakti Yoga, love of God, we don't have to worry. You don't study these verses 9 to 14, concession. You just take the name of the Lord, you be by the feet of the Lord. In the language of Jnana Yoga, those who are intensely inquiring, watching their mind, those who are mumukshus. I had quoted an expression from Shankara's commentary, parivrat mumukshu. Those who are not attached to anything particular. They are those who have an open mind, those who have a learning mind. Krishnamurti uses the expression, learning mind. Those who do not try to encash again and again one good old check. That I had got a trophy in 1989, you better know. I can show you the certificate. 89, 20 years have passed, but I want to encash. Or I am the son of so-and-so, I am the grandson of so-and-so. Drawing from the past. What are you at present? Present I am 0, but 89 I got that trophy. That is all. That is not parivrat. Parivrat means who moves on. The victories of the past as well as the defeat of past, he leaves behind. He moves on or she moves on moment to moment. Another favorite expression of Krishnamurti. Live moment to moment. Why are you carrying the burden of the past? Swami Chinmayananji always said, don't be pulled down by regrets of the past or anxieties of the future. So parivrat is not so much somebody who is physically going all over. That is not so important. Physically you may be in Pune only, but your mind is not attached to the bygone past. Nor is your mind unnecessarily visualizing kya hoga, future. Unnecessary. Where necessary, yes, there is a time to plan. There is a time to analyze and learn from the past. That's different. Remembering is one thing, but brooding over the past is different. No wisdom tells you not to remember the past. If it were literal erasure of memory, you could go to a neurosurgeon and ask him, निकाल दो यार, सॉफ्टवेयर निकाल दो, पूरा OS ही हटा दो इससे, इतनी परेशानी कर रहा है ये मेरा दिमाग ही निकाल दो. No, that won't work. You need to have a functional mind. When you need to remember, you will remember. Remember, in fact, memory brings its own richness to life. If next time I come to Pune, suppose I don't remember any of you. Hamiji, we were there in the front row, second row. We asked you a lot of questions. If I say, but you see, what did I teach? What am I teaching? Living in the present. And I am living in the present. I don't remember any of you at all. Would it look good? It will be terrible. We need to remember each other. We need to remember the help we received from friends and be grateful. And we need to remember lessons people taught us and be careful. Memory enriches our life. But there is another kind of memory which is of the nature of brooding. Brooding is different. And Ramana Maharshi compares it with taking, crumpled paper, useless paper that you had thrown into a waste basket, taking it back and, useless. Tomorrow again pick it up, again throw it. What is this? Once for all decide, this is waste, I am throwing it to the waste basket. And then don't pick it up at all. Let it go. Let it get burned. Let it get thrown away. So, brooding is what is objected to. So here, for someone who is at the source, all these are not necessary. Sambhuti, asambhuti, vidya, avidya, for what? But the fact of our life is you and I don't have that pure devotion to God. Our situation is we love God, we have a list of things we love, and the 18th item is God. There is God. Or sometimes it is not even the 18th. The list is very long, like Hanuman's tale. Then somebody asks, what about God? Don't you love God? Wait a minute. God also. God is added there at the end. Then we are not parivrad mumukshu. We are not good bhaktas. Then these are very important to us. The fine balancing act is extremely important. We shall see one more mantra today briefly and maybe a little time for question and answer. There is towards the end of the Upanishad certain examples or certain samples of how somebody, not enlightened soul, somebody who has striven hard in vidya and avidya, karma and upasana, somebody who has tried sincerely balancing part and the whole, somebody who has tried to do maximum justice to different areas of her duty, his duty. हमने प्रयास किया है ताकि हमसे कहीं भी कुछ अन्याय न हो. Sare Jivan, I have tried to live honestly. Suppose somebody has tried, but there are some errors here and there, some misunderstandings. And so, such a person who has been honest, but he is not so pure or so wise or so, so clear in his perception, all the same, towards the end of his life, submits some prayers to the Lord. One of them is, Hiranmayena patrena satyasyapi hitam mukham tattvam pushanna pavranu Satyadharmaya Drishtaye. If one were enlightened, there would be no such prayer. The enlightened soul lives a spontaneous life. He no more begs for any favor. But you and I, short of enlightenment, we have appreciated a lot of spiritual literature. We love, we like, we really adore and admire the contributions of saints and sages. But in fact, we have that sentiment in all the 4 verses. It comes very powerfully towards the end actually. We have, alas, a little bit of regrets at some errors we committed, some lapses that took place at our hands. At the same time, we remember that we have tried hard. So here, such a candidate with whom perhaps most of us can identify raises his hands or her hands and prays, "O Pushan." Pushan is a name of God. Pushan literally means the nourisher, pushti dene wala. The sun is called Pushan because the sun nourishes all. And in this context, Pushan is God. O God, however much I tried and I am trying, I am not able to see you as you are. Something or the other distracts me. And a beautiful metaphor is given here. O Pushan, O brilliant sun, sun is symbolic of God. O the bright God principle, your face, how unfortunate I am, is covered or the vision is obstructed by a gold lid, Hiranmaya Patra. Patra is a lid here. Nothing ordinary, a gold lid. And in my immaturity, I admit here, I confess, all along the gold lid was so enchanting to me. I went on looking at the gold lid. I got attached to the gold lid. But now, towards the end of my life, I realize my mistake and I request you, please remove that gold lid. It is like praying to God, Lord, you threw the net of Maya and I got caught. But Lord, that net is your own net. Whenever you want, you can cut it away. You can remove it. Please remove that net. Please remove that lid. The gold lid is a very powerful expression because, let me for this evening briefly say, in spirituality, left and right, we criticize this thing called attachment. Don't be attached, don't be attached, don't be attached, be detached, be detached. All of us advise everybody else, but our own attachments we cannot drop. Paropadesha Panditya, all of us have. In Kali Yuga, it is said maximum people are great scholars in advising others. Paropadesha Panditya. People like us also do a 2-year course and then another 10 years we go everywhere. Why is it so difficult to be detached? Really speaking, this world has tremendous amount of charm. Tremendous amount, everywhere, dance and music and clothes and food and scholastic achievements. This world has countless charms. Everything, with technology now, even more. Therefore, the analogy is most appropriate. It is a gold lid. It's no ordinary thing. Somebody asked Ramana Maharshi once, why is there sorrow in the world? He said, because of sorrow, you have a chance to turn inward. If there were to be no sorrow, no death, no disease, no calamity, no financial loss, no failure, suppose any of us were just succeeding everywhere, any of us were only having a winning streak, then our ego will grow. We have to fail. But by and large, even though we fail, the victories and the pleasure and the honor we received, the bhoga, enjoyments we enjoyed, all of them hold us captive. The gold lid is so true. This universe is tremendously attractive. But only when our vairagya or our observation gets very sharp, we say, this world of course has countless pleasures to offer, but it has problem. It is covering the final truth. Therefore God, enough. I no more want to see the gold lid and say, ha ha ha, enough. Gold lid nikal do. It's like if you want to go and meet a chief executive somewhere and receptionist is very beautiful. However charming she may be, however friendly she may be, however, I'm giving example of a man. Man goes, the receptionist is very pretty and then she, come on, sit, have a drink and so on. If the visitor is alert, after a while he says to the receptionist, Madam, thank you, but I have appointment with your, boss. Maybe another lady inside. I have appointment with the madam inside. You are very nice, you have been good, you offered me tea and whatnot, you spoke to me so well. But now, gold lid, the pretty receptionist who is courteous, who is helpful is like a gold lid. A wise visitor will not settle there only. He remembers the true purpose. In pretty much same way, you and I have to be detached. Therefore, Hiranmaya Patra apavranu, remove it so that I may see the ultimate truth. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.